Section 1.7, write the inequality in interval notation. Okay, so it's really important to be able to read these two. It's to read them. Can somebody tell me what number 1 says? Do you have a microphone and say it out loud? What does number 1 say?
X is greater than or equal to -2?
Yes, she said X is, and then the big part is next to the X. X is greater than or equal to, that's the equal part, greater than or equal to -2. That's what she said. Perfect. Now, many people get number 2 wrong. Many people get number 2 wrong. Somebody different want to say number 2? It's going to be wrong. What's number 2 say?
8 is less than or equal to X?
See, I knew you'd be wrong. No, it's really important to understand this because everybody gets it wrong usually the first time. When you read inequalities, you always start with the X. You don't always read from left to right. Sometimes you read from right to left. So here we read it, X is greater than or equal to -2. On this one, you have to start with X. X is, now I'm going backwards because we started with the X. X is greater. X is greater than or equal to 8. So you have to read these backwards if the X is on the other side. You always start with the X. So when you read these, always start with X, okay? Really important. And that's, I mean, that's going to help us. Number 3, something different. So now that we know how to read these, I want to graph them also. Show you, here's a line, a graph, and on the x-axis, here's 0, 1, 2, 3. On the other side of 0, you get -1, -2, -3. Write in inequality and interval notation. So first I want to graph it. X is greater than -2. Here's -2. By the way, I wish I could go to the homework. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna show you 2 different possible symbols. I think I mentioned this briefly before. This means greater than or less than. This filled in means greater than or equal or less than or equal. But also you could use parentheses, but if you have equal signs, you have to use brackets. So it depends on what we're using. Here, there's an equal sign, so we're filling that in. X is greater than -2. Things that are greater are to the right. And everything to the right is greater. That's why this is how you graph it. We start at -2. Equal sign means we fill in the circle and it's greater than. By the way, another similar way of writing this, you use the bracket. Do you see? So you can use the bracket or the filled in circle. They both mean the same thing. They mean equal to. The greater is the arrow. It's pointing to the right. That's greater. You know, when you go to the right, that's greater. Okay, so we have to write this in interval notation. They say, give me the answer in interval notation. You usually get the answer on the graph. On interval notation, the leftmost number and the rightmost number. Left is always on the left side and right is always on the right side. What is of our graph, what is the leftmost number? What number is that right there?
-2.
Yes, -2, comma. What is this arrow pointing to?
Greater than.
Yeah, but what number? We have to put a number there.
There's no number.
There is a number. You just can't see it. It's
So
going on forever.
So it's going on forever, eternity. It doesn't stop.
Yes, we call that infinity.
Okay.
There we go, infinity. And on the other side, if the arrow's going that way, it's negative infinity on the other side, okay? So the far right, this graph goes all the way to infinity. Now, you can never touch infinity. So infinity always has a parentheses. Do you see? It never equal infinity, so you always put a parentheses. But the -2, the -2 does have it's a filled in circle. It says equals, so it equals -2, so you have to put a bracket. This is how the answer should look. This is interval notation. The graph starts at -2, it equals -2, and it goes all the way to infinity, but you can never touch infinity, so you get the parentheses there. That's what interval notation looks like, the far left and the far right. All right, everybody okay with that? We're gonna do a couple more. All righty. So this next one, I'm gonna put it on a graph. Here's 0. We're gonna start with 8. And somebody read it and it says X. Then if you look, the big part is next to X. We gotta go backwards because we started with the X. X is greater. So greater X, you can also say instead of X, you can say the graph. The graph is greater than 8. Greater than 8 is going that way. That's the greater. Greater is going to the right. Greater than 8. It equals 8. So we can use the bracket. Remember, when you can use this for a bracket, or you can use that when we have less than or equal to or greater than or equal to. But it's an open circle if we have less than or greater than or parentheses. So either those work for that. So the interval notation, once you graph it, we're done. I'm sorry, I should have did this. The far left number is -8. The far right number, this arrow goes to the right, it goes to infinity. You can never touch infinity, so you always use a parentheses. And since we have an equal sign, you use a bracket. This is the answer for number 2. The graph is between -8 and infinity. It goes all the way to infinity, and it equals -8.
Wait, why is it -8?
Oh,
Yeah.
+8. I'm sorry. I'm blind. Oh, you didn't know that rule where you change the sign? No. Thank you. Wasn't the last number negatives, and I just still thinking, no, it's a +8. You're right. So that's the answer. Thank you. Okay, so number 3. Most people get this wrong too when they try to say it. It's really easy. I thought I told you guys, maybe that was my other class. Does anybody know how to read number 3? We have a, well, I always like to put 0. We have a 6 and we have a -8. The way to say this, watch this, x, or you can say the graph. You always start with the x. The graph is between these two numbers. The graph is between -8 and 6. So if I was going to graph this, the graph is between these two numbers. Now look at the 6. There's no equal sign. So you have to use a parentheses, not a bracket. And look at the -8. There's no equal sign. So you have to use the parentheses. Look, those parentheses enclose the graph. So whatever you do, don't do this. The parentheses have to enclose the graph.
So if we were using the circles, it would be the open circle on
Yes,
both sides?
thank you. Yes, this is how it would. But I see here, look, they're not using open circles. They're using the brackets and all. However, on the test, we're using circles. Unfortunately, it's going to be different. On the test, we're using the open circles and the closed circles. But on the homework, I think they're using, the test is a little different. But so you need to know both. Yes, this is one way of writing the graph. This is the other. So the interval notation, the far left number is -8. The far right number is 6. And you always use whatever the parentheses or brackets when you do interval, and they're both parentheses because they don't equal. This is the interval answer. Interval notation answer. That's the interval notation answer. Yeah, on the test, I have the circles filled in and not filled in. The test is a little different. It's a Canvas test. It's just a little different. But it's everything else is the same. That's why I show you both. Most books try to show you both of them. Let's try to graph number 4. X is between those two numbers. By the way, when X is between those two numbers, the arrows always point to the left. The smaller number has to be on the left. If you look, the smaller number, negative, is smaller than a positive for number 3. And then here, 4 is smaller than 7. The smaller number is always to the left, and the arrows are always pointing to the left. So to graph this, here's 0, here's 4, here's 7. X is between those two numbers. The 4 doesn't have an equal sign, so you have to put a parentheses. The 7 has an equal sign, so it requires a bracket. The interval notation is 4 is on the left-hand side, and 7 is on the right. Do you see how interval notation, the 4, you need a parentheses, the 7, you need a bracket because there's an equal sign here, and there's no equal sign there. That's the interval answer for number 4. These aren't too bad yet. How many questions do we have? Number 5, write the interval answer. So you can get it right off the graph. The question said write the interval answer. The number on the far left is -3. It has a parentheses. The number on the far right is 6. It has a bracket. We're done. They give you the graph. I have the interval answer. Oh, I'm sure they're going to get a little harder than this. Oh, number 6. Try to write down number 6 for an answer. Let's see if you get the same thing. Give me the interval answer for number 6.
Would it be -7 to the infinity?
Yeah, but I was waiting for everybody else too.
Oh, sorry.
You're close. You didn't write it down, but yes, it's
I'm sorry.
-7 to infinity. Infinity has the parentheses, but -7 has the bracket. You can never touch infinity. That's why it always has a parentheses. So the parentheses and the bracket are really important in this problem. So it's -7 comma infinity, but the -7 has the bracket because this has a bracket. There's an equal sign. You can never equal infinity, so you always put a parentheses by the infinity. And 7, the far left is negative infinity. Since we're on the negative side, you can never touch infinity, use a parentheses. The far right is 9, and it has a parenthesis, so you also put a parenthesis. It doesn't equal 9. It gets really close to 9. 8.9999999, but it doesn't touch 9. If it touched 9, there would be a bracket. It gets really close, but it doesn't touch 9. Oh no. Okay. Solving. We know how to solve for x, so we're going to solve for x. By the way, the steps for solving are the same. I want to do a different one first, though, if I can find it. Let me see. I'm looking. Now, see, they don't have it. They don't have the one I'm looking for. Okay, that's okay. That's okay. Okay, so this is important. We always want x to be positive. Always. If we have a negative x, then something bad happens. So try to keep x positive. That means in this particular problem, I want to take the 4x. Remember, the steps for solving distribute. There is no distribute. Combine like terms. I can't add these. I can't add these. Get all the step 3. Get all the x's to one side. So I need to make my x's positive. So to take this 4x to the other side, I add 4x to both sides. 4x. That turns to 0. I'm minus 3x plus 4x is 1x. This is what I'm left with, right? When I take the 4x to the other side, I'm left with a positive x. Now, if I take the 2 to the other side, I add 2, and I can read this. It says x is greater than 12. So when I solve this, x is greater than 12. So on my graph, I don't know which one is 12, so I'm just going to mark it 12. X is greater than 12. There's no equal sign, so greater than 12 goes to the right. Greater is the right. There's no equal sign, so we use parentheses. Interval notation. The far left is 12, and it's a parentheses. The far right is infinity, and it's in parentheses. There's my interval notation. There's my graph at 12, and it goes all the way to infinity. That's the graph. This is the interval notation. That's not too bad, as long as we remember how to solve for x. And if you can keep the x positive, I hate this. I'm gonna make the x negative, and I'm gonna show you what you do for, just in case you end up with a negative x. I'm gonna show you what happens when you end up with a negative x, but it's okay. I'm going to take, it doesn't matter, I'm gonna take all the x's to one side, so I'm gonna take the 6x over there. Minus 6x minus 6x. And I end up with 5x minus 6x is a minus 1x plus 9 is greater than or equal to 17. Now I'm going to take the 9 to the other side by minusing 9, and I get negative 8 is greater than or equal to 17 minus 9 is 8. Okay. So I have to get rid of the negative sign. And don't forget, the negative sign kind of really remembers there's a negative 1 here. It's a negative 1 times x. To get rid of it, you have to divide by negative 1. Negative 1 divided by negative 1 is a positive x. 8 divided by negative 1 is a negative 1. Now, put a little star by these problems. When you solve for x for inequality, by the way, inequality, because we have a greater than. They're not equal, they're greater than or less than. That's why we call it inequality. They're not equal, they're either greater than or less than. There might be an equal in it, but there's a greater than or less than symbol. Inequality, when dividing by a negative number, you have to change direction of the arrow. So do you see I divided by a negative number, divide by negative, I get x and negative 8, but the arrow has to change direction. Only when you divide by a negative number, the arrow changes direction. That's why I said try to keep the x positive, then you don't have to change the direction. So now we can read this. X is less than negative 8. I'll mark negative 8 here. Less than or equal to, bracket, and less than is that way. So the interval notation answer is negative infinity, right? The arrow is going to the left. The far left is negative infinity. You can never touch infinity. The far right is negative 8, and it has a bracket. There's my interval answer. When you divide by a negative number, do you see how the arrow changed directions? It's really important. The arrow change directions. Only when you divide or multiply by a negative number, inequalities. That's why I say try to keep the x positive, and you'll never have to divide by a negative number. Try to keep that x positive. All right. Okay, let's take this 7x to the other side. That'll keep us positive. It's a minus 7x. I'm going to add 7x. 6x plus 7x is 1x, positive 1x. The arrow stays in the same direction. Now I just take the 9 to the other side. Minus 9, minus 9. And x is less than or equal to negative 9. That's it. We just have to draw that picture. I'm calling this negative 9. X is less than. The graph is less than. Remember, less than is to the left. There's negative 9. Oh. There's negative 9 to the left. Negative infinity is over there, and 9 is over here. And I'm going to fill it in because there's an equal sign. So you could either use a bracket or a filled in circle. Once again, the far left is negative infinity. The far right is negative 9. The negative infinity is always a parentheses. Here, since we have an equal sign in the -9, you have to use a bracket. And there's our answer.
Is it -11?
Oh, did I do something wrong? Yes.
Yes, you did.
Well, speak up sooner. -2 minus 9 is -11. See, I get so messy, I can't even read my own writing. Thank you. There. Everything's the same. Just change that to a -11. Thanks. All right. And so this is just the same. I'm gonna skip this one. And how many more do we have? 12, 13. Oh, good. Let's do. Let me see. Let's do number 13. So since they're both similar. Wait, is there 2 distributes up there? No. Let's do number 13. Step 1, when we solve for x, we distribute. -5 times 6, I'm going to put it down here, is -30x. -5 times a -3, negative times a negative is a +15. So I'm going to try to keep my x's positive. So if I bring this 35x to the other side, it'll be positive. -35x, you have to do the opposite, add 35x. When I do that, I get 0 here, I get -25. The arrow stays in the same direction. -30 plus 35 is 5x plus 15. All right, so I'm left with 5x plus 15 is less than -25. Okay, I need to get the 15 to the other side and the 5. Always take the add and subtract to the other side first. -40, and then divide by 5. It's a +5, so we're dividing by 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1x. -40 divided by 5 is a -8. We divided by a positive, so the arrow does not change direction. So x is less than -8. You can call any of these dots -8. Less than -8 is that way. Less than. X is less than -8. There's no equal sign, so we use a parentheses. The far left is -infinity. The far right is -8. You don't touch either one of those because there's no equal sign. And this is the answer. And that is solving inequalities and graphing inequalities and using interval notation. All right. There's a lot of information. I mean, that first section that we covered was a ton of new information. And if you look at it, each problem was done a little different. I mean, the steps were there, and there were like 3 different types of problems in that first section. You're really going to have to practice those slowly, take your time at it. Oh, Lord. Yeah, I don't envy you because I know that's going to take a while to get that section. This last section we did looks pretty easy. I think you can get through that. It'll be a lot easier than the previous section we did. Are there any questions for the night? Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question about the homework. So I noticed my grade had dropped like about 10 points because I didn't do a couple of the homework. Is there any way we can go back into that?
Yes. I've already told everybody, if I've set the homework up to where you can do it late. Even though my homework policy, I like to scare everybody. Normally, in a regular class period, I don't, for a 16-week face-to-face, I don't accept late work. But for the summer, I do. If you go back and click on a homework assignment you didn't do, I think it says something like, do you want to improve your grade or something? Just hit yes, and you can do the homework, and the grade will be updated. On Monday, I will then update your homework grade. So yes, you can go back and do homework that you haven't completed already.
Thank you.
Okay.
I
Anything
have
else?
a question. Yes.
Yes.
On my exam, I made an 85. Were we supposed to go back and try and do a better grade after that, or could we?
No, you
just-
didn't have to. Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, 85 is fine. See, that's your correct part of the grade. That if you look, those two correct grades have nothing to do with this college algebra class, other than it gets you through the correct part, and you'll never, if by some weird chance you fail the college algebra, you'll never have to do the correct again. You'll go straight into the college algebra course.
Okay.
So
I just want
so
to make sure.
yeah, no, so you didn't have to redo it. No, I mean, I'm saying if you scored like a 50 on it, I would redo it because you want to pass at least. And I think when I look back at it, pretty much everybody passed at the second test. Test 2.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, wait, I think I still need to take one person's roll. I thought I had roll on one more person. That was a little late. I don't know. I think everybody's here. Let me see what my attendance said. Let's see. Is Amanda here?
Yes.
Okay, we're good to go. I'll see you guys tomorrow night. Bye.
Good night.
Bye-bye. I'll hang around if there's any questions. Last call. All right, you guys have a good evening. Bye all.
I'm sorry, I just have another question.
Sure.
So I had noticed my grade went from like a B to a C, and I guess it's because of the homework. So
And you probably didn't take the quiz either.
no, I did.
Well, how bad was your homework? Wait,
Well,
I'm gonna go look at it real quick. I'm not gonna show it. I'm just gonna go look at it. Hang on.
okay.
Give me a second.
I did.
Who is this anyway?
Samantha.
Okay. Oh wow, yeah, your homework average really dropped. You didn't do any homework this week?
I did some modules.
Yeah,
But
you missed.
I'm gonna go back in there.
Yeah, go back and finish that, and then your grade to go back up.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Thank
So
you.
go back and finish those.
Okay.
All right. You weren't the only one who didn't do all your homework. All right. And
Thank
next
you.
Monday, I'll update the grade.
Okay.
All right. Matilda, did you have a question? Oh, no, she didn't.